Welcome. Welcome to each of you. And thank you for joining this month's webinar, the MCC webinar that takes you behind the scenes and looks at MCC's work. We have people joining tonight on Zoom. We have people joining via Facebook Live from multiple countries. Welcome to each of you. And I'd like to thank you for your ongoing support of MCC and your interest in this work. You are part of the MCC story, and we're grateful that we can offer you this unique view of the way we serve in the name of Christ, something that has come to us now and during these pandemic times. My name is Ann Graber-Hirschberger, and I serve as the Executive Director of Mennonite Central Committee US, and I will be your host this evening. I bring you greetings from the MCC US office in Akron, Pennsylvania. Just a couple of logistical suggestions here. If you're on Zoom, you will be kept muted throughout the whole webinar. And if you'd like to submit a question, if you're on Zoom, please do so through the Q&A function. If you take your cursor down to the bottom and hover there, you'll see the Q&A. And then those questions will be collated, and we'll answer them together at the end after James and Linda have presented. If you've joined via Facebook, please submit your questions through the comments section, and somebody is monitoring those and will feed them to us. So you can, as soon as you have a question, you can post it there and we'll gather them up and then try to answer as many as possible in the question and answer time at the last half of the webinar. We're also recording the session, and the recording of this webinar will be made public following this. So now on to our topic tonight. Tonight we'll be hearing from James Wheeler and Linda Herr, the Area Directors for Europe and the Middle East. We want to hear how MCC partners in challenging settings are communicating God's love and words in action. And we'll discover how we can all be part of something that's bigger than any one of us. James and Linda's presentation will highlight various aspects of MCC programs in Europe and the Middle East, including displaced persons, refugees, their needs, basic human needs, otherwise material resources uses. Now, anybody that's heard James and Linda before, and those of you who haven't are in for a treat. They're wonderful storytellers. So let's sit back and enjoy the colors and flavors of this presentation. They will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 30 minutes for questions and feedback. And again, please submit your questions through the Q&A function or through the Facebook comments. And just a further note about James and Linda, they're based in Amman, Jordan. They've also worked in MCC Egypt, the West Bank, and Gaza, where our main activity was teaching English, and in Egypt, where they were reps. Before taking their current position, James was manager of MCC East Coast Material Resources Center in Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and Linda worked in human resources in MCC, the national U.S. office. And they have 3 adult children. Welcome to you, Linda and James, and we turn this time over to you, eager to hear what you have to say to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's so good to be with you this evening. And our presentation is entitled this evening, The Gift of Love and Compassion, Doing Our Part for Healing and Wholeness in the World. We're all doing what we know how to do and are able to do, and we join in with others close at hand and in other parts of the world, reaching out in love to our neighbors. We want to share a bit this evening with you to demonstrate a little bit of some of the work that we're doing in this way. First of all, MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, is a worldwide ministry of Anabaptist churches, sharing God's love and compassion for all in the name of Christ by responding to basic human needs and working for peace and justice. MCC envisions communities worldwide in right relationship with God, one another, and with creation. Just to note here at the beginning, in MCC, each year we have a guiding verse. And the guiding verse this year for 2021 is from Psalm 46:1, which says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." We're grateful for the way that we experience this verse and how it touches our lives. And we realize that it's not just for us, but it's for all of God's people around the world.
We are area directors overseeing MCC's work in Europe and the Middle East, which means that we are working on 3 continents. MCC Egypt is in Africa. In the Middle East, we oversee programs in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Palestine and Israel. And then in Europe, we have MCC Ukraine, and we also work in West Europe. Now, when we say work, this year, this looks like different from other years in many ways, in that it's a lot more has moved to the screen. But we continue to work with the staff in these different offices who are carrying out the work and connecting with people who are really responding to some basic human needs, and to which includes food, shelter, clothing, and peace building, and a wide spectrum along that way. We'll give you some examples of these this evening. So to start, here's a picture from Lebanon, from a goat distribution in the Bekaa Valley. It's one of the most fertile regions of Lebanon, but it's also one of the poorest because of its underdeveloped economy, and it hosts a high number of Syrian refugees. So this organization is called, the partner organization that MCC works with is called the Lebanese Organization for Studies and Training, which is LOST when we refer to it by abbreviations, but they've set up a program to train women to care for goats and milk production, and to learn small business skills so that their families have better nutrition from the dairy production and higher income from selling the products. So goat distributions happen annually, and this one, where a mother came with her children to receive their goat, happened a year ago. This required physical distancing, masks, careful crowd management as the women and the children gathered in the distribution area. But unlike the goat project, MCC's response to the August 4, 2020 blast in Beirut was a one-time crisis response. It was a one-time crisis. The response was a little bit longer than that. But the blast is believed to have been caused by large quantities of ammonium nitrate, which can be used for fertilizer as well as explosives. It was stored unsafely in a warehouse at the city's port. It caused extensive damage throughout the city of Beirut, and MCC's partners requested assistance to meet a wide variety of needs, including cleanup, food distribution, and eventually home and business repairs. As MCC staff joined neighbors with brooms, they found young adults who were part of an organization that received funding through a completely different program with MCC. One that finds about 17 different community organizations in several different countries, which are working to bring together people across divides in the communities, which often means bringing together people of different religious groups in creative ways. So MCC has found these groups with creative ideas and the sort of willingness to jump in to improve communities, even when the task is as huge as going at this cleanup with the brooms that are available. As part of the response to the blast that MCC joined in, was with this partner called PARD, providing psychosocial support to children located in the Karantina area of Beirut, which is a low-income area close by and heavily affected by the port explosion. And this activity in the picture of children painting was part of a set of activities that a specialized trauma psychologist was conducting to reduce stress among children affected by the blast. The activity asked children to draw a heart with their fingers and write what is it that they love the most. Afterwards, they were asked to connect with the hearts if they saw something they love in the other children's hearts. MCC has been able to support this work. has been able to support this work which has been ongoing. It's moved inside and now includes support for children who've missed most of the school year due to COVID-19. But we were actually able to have a recent visit with this group and to see them at work now. And some of that work again involves computer screens. In this case, tracking who gets what. Some of it involves sorting out kits, adding in toothpaste, which is shipped separately from the hygiene kits, and putting them 2 or 3 in a bag, these heavy duty black bags, so that people can carry them home. And also they can't be comparing themselves to what does the neighbor get, what do I have, and simply take care of their own needs. With these staff people that day, we got to talk about the quality of the buckets that hold the relief kits and how useful they are, about the quality of the towels and how towels like that currently aren't for sale anymore right now in Lebanon. They also told us, oops, there. They love to open the bales of comforters and even choose which designs they like the best, even which they wish they could take home if they could. They told us about how important it can be to have a comforter, just to put a baby down on the floor to play. It was in conversations with these Lebanese young adults and staff in another partner organization about what a challenge it was for them to get up and do what they could. In the current situation in Lebanon, with a government that barely functions, hyperinflation that can close supermarkets when it isn't clear what food prices should be, protests that close streets, lines of cars at gas stations because of shortages, and then the port explosion and a global pandemic. In this situation, for people to get up and do the part that they can, for the people they can do it for, that's an immense sign of hope. It's hope for people who will eat that day, and also for the staff of these organizations and their own families, that there are people in other parts of the world who are joining them in their efforts and can make a real difference for people today. Syria, MCC has been joining with partners to meet basic needs, such as heaters and warm coats in the winter and safe places for children who need to process loss and make new friends. These children in the picture are attending activities at a child-friendly spaces program. Once or twice a week for 4 to 6 hours, the program gives children who have been displaced or who have suffered significant loss an opportunity to build trust as they play together, participate in classes that encourage them to express their emotions through drama, art, music, and organized games. And they also get hot meals, and when they were restricted to their homes, staff went and found them and took them their activities. We've been able to have the privilege of working with creative staff in lots of places as they respond to COVID. In Gaza, one of our favorite projects has been the rabbit raising food security project. The rabbits provide protein for the families that raise them. And it's another example of families having more income from the sale of rabbits they raise and even their waste being sold as fertilizer. Other MCC projects in Gaza include summer day camps for children, vocational training for young adults. And right now, MCC is reaching out through the staff in these partner organizations to provide for some immediate needs following the most recent destruction in Gaza. And this includes just food. We know that rabbits have survived previous crises and hope they can be part of the recovery this time. MCC supports groups working for peace between and among Israelis and Palestinians, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, in the hopes that we will not have to support this kind of rebuilding ever again. Sometimes this hope is like what I've mentioned earlier, a matter of simply joining and reaching the people who are closest today with what they need right now. In Ukraine, some of the children and families MCC are reaching are those who have ongoing challenges for receiving an education towards leading a full life. These children and their families and teachers face some of the greatest challenges in learning how to do this remotely during a pandemic, but they kept working at it creatively and figuring better ways to do it. Another Ukrainian group that responded to COVID-19 challenges works with people who've been displaced by conflict at its borders or otherwise very vulnerable. This is New Life Charitable Fund, and with support from MCC, they began teaching women to sew and market their creations. After just 1 year, the women were receiving multiple orders. And then last March 2020, the group came to MCC to ask for assistance to start up a project sewing masks. There simply weren't enough masks to buy, but we were afraid that the masks wouldn't actually provide the sort of protection their staff needed. We hadn't heard of anyone doing this yet, but there were instructions on the internet and the women got their work underway. They were able to supply their staff with protection and soon also the people that they worked with. As they continued to feed hungry people, the city actually put their name out as a place to go for a hot meal, and even as an organization that would deliver meals when the movement of the general public or of public transportation was restricted, and these people would go hungry otherwise. Another organization in a very different setting that depends on volunteers from local churches alongside paid staff to reach out to neighbors in need is in Jordan. Caritas receives MCC humanitarian aid to reach out to neighbors in need, reaching out to refugees and the Jordanian low-income communities where they live. Many of the refugees are Syrian, but there are others. As in many parts of the world, refugees and migrant laborers settle where they can afford rent. In Jordan, the response to needs has been careful to not only respond with, say, school kits for Syrian children in this photo, but provide for their Jordanian neighbors, and maybe Iraqis or Somalis who are in a similar situation. People are on the move in ways we often don't see when there's hope to improve their situation in another place. In the case of this partner in Jordan, MCC support also allows the small Christian community to show they care for their neighbors in practical ways. Some of this practical assistance in Jordan has come from European Mennonites. In patchwork groups in maybe 24 communities, people are piecing together the warm care that's expressed in the comforter blanket. At the same time, some of these groups are bringing together newcomers who have recently had a refugee experience to work alongside, in this case, Germans who have not. What's been amazing in the past year is that the number of comforters these groups have assembled has far exceeded their expectations. People stayed home and didn't get to meet to work together, but they still work to meet the increasing need. And these are from Dutch collections. These are just a bit of a glimpse into the ways we connect with others, especially in how we can share hope with each other one step at a time. I don't know if you can see on this, each handprint, the color of each handprint represents a different country where the people who did this on a wall in a training center in Jordan comes from. And then in the middle of the name of the hand, in the middle of the hand is the name of the person whose handprint this is. In the past few years, I've been struck by the image of the tree of life, growing by the water of life, which is bright as crystal, as described in Revelation 22. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. This image of a tree with a heart at the center, I'm hoping that heart might go a little bit high on the screen, but there's a heart at the center and the leaves have the names of the people from many nations. And it stands as a reminder to me that here and now, our hands are for the healing of our neighbors.
We reflect a lot on the hopes and dreams of people, especially of the many children who are affected by the conflicts that we are become aware of. And I really like the one mural on the right side here, which is quite large, several floors high, that says, you know, what will I be when I grow up? You know, and looking at the boys, pointing in the distance, you know, maybe, you know, thinking about what, you know, what they may be when they grow up. I'm going to tell a story about Abdullah. And Abdullah is a boy from Aleppo, Syria, living in Amman, Jordan for the past several years, or maybe 10 years or more, or at least since the beginning of the Civil War. Fleeing violence with his mother, father, and siblings by plane, they must have been a family of some means. Now there are 9 siblings, the youngest a baby of several months. Abdullah is now an orphan. His father, aged 50, died just a few months ago. I met Abdullah a couple months ago while I was waiting for a friend in Paris Circle and would chatted with him a bit in Arabic. He came up to me with 2 little packets of tissues and asked me if I wanted to buy any. I said no. Then he said, "Well, can you give me money for some food?" I asked him if he was hungry and what he would like to eat, to which he replied, a shawarma sandwich. I told him to come with me around the corner to a sandwich shop and I would buy him one, to which he agreed. As we were walking, I felt a touch on my arm. He said, "Uncle, what I really need is food for my 7-month-old baby sister." He then pointed across the plaza to a pharmacy. He said I could get baby formula there for his sister. I was a bit torn about what to do and decided to see what was available at the pharmacy. Abdullah led me across the plaza to the pharmacy on the other side. As he was about to go in, I noticed he wasn't wearing a mask, which was required to enter. I asked him where his mask was, and he told me that he didn't have one, so I asked him to wait outside. When I went into the pharmacy, I was surprised by the quantity and variety of baby formula. He must have noticed my confusion because he then came in and pointed to the exact one he needed. I looked at the price and was surprised by how expensive it was, but I decided to purchase and give it to Abdullah. When I handed the formula over to him, I found out a little more about his life situation. He hadn't been able to go to school for quite some time because of COVID and because of the need to support his family. He wasn't very articulate, but he was tenacious. I had to reflect on to what extreme would someone go to feed his baby brother or sister, especially as an orphan. Decisions, what to do, how to survive, trusting in the goodness of others in the face of violence and vulnerability. Abdullah then thanked me for the formula and went on his way down the street towards home. This is just one small snapshot of what it's like for many, many uprooted people in the area of Europe and Middle East where we are, and of course other parts of the world. I had to reflect too on some quotes that we've heard from different people along the way. One quote was about hope from Dr. Robert Karakash, who's the director of Hope, House of Light and Hope. And he reflected on hope. And he said, resurrection is our hope. We have to bear the cross. Ultimately, it's about love. You find that your neighbor is hungry and you can give from what you have. This is the essence of the Lebanese people and the Lebanese culture. Another staff person from another organization named Michelle said more and more people are calling us to find just a little hope, even before they ask for support from the programs we're running. Another staff person from the same organization, Muriel, said on coping strategies, she said, people are becoming obliged to do things they normally wouldn't do because they don't have enough food, such as going into supermarkets, emptying packets of cheese, and then leaving the empty packages on the shelf. Or people are asking their neighbors not to throw their leftovers away because they're in need of the extra food. When we visited one program participant in the area of the blast, she said, your visit shows us that we have value and helps us feel a sense of dignity. So we're grateful for this time, grateful for your participation here. We're grateful for the partners and for their willingness to show up to meet the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in their communities. We talk about sharing God's love and compassion for all in the name of Christ as the main purpose of the work that we are committed to. Perhaps we carry this out by leaning forward into something we don't already know, leaning into the emerging future, which requires us to open the mind, open the heart, and open the will, which only works if we can access our capacity for curiosity, compassion, and courage, and deep love for God, neighbor, and self. So thanks so much, and again, we're grateful for this time to be with you. And to leave you here with a verse that kind of also we reflect on and we find sustaining day to day is from Psalm 107, verse 1, which says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." Thank you.
Thank you, James and Linda. I would like to go there with you and see some of those places and those people. I was drawn in immediately when you use the term Baca Valley, because I think it's in the Psalms somewhere where it talks about that it will be made a valley of springs. I'm not sure if it's the same place, but I've always thought about that. Such images we've been led through, from rabbits to school kits to goats to quilts to trauma, addressing trauma, vocational training, peace camps, story of Abdallah, and stories of partners. So thank you. And I would invite folks to put your questions in the chat. There are a couple that have come in, and let me just put a very specific one to you about a particular location. I'm not sure that you would know about this or not, but somebody's interested in understanding something about the Near East School for Theology, which would have been in Beirut, I think, and wondering if how they have recovered or how they encountered the blast.
Yeah, they seem to have been managing well. They're an important partner. They provide living space for the young adults participating in the SALT program for MCC, and so that's a very practical way that MCC has been working together with Nest. I don't believe that they sustained very heavy damage during the blast. They've also managed well with COVID and having to be closed and being very careful about who's coming in and who's coming out at any given time. So it's an ongoing issue of who you're reaching and how and what happens on a screen and what can continue. But yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the area was affected. And I think there was some damage at the Mary School of Theology, but not terrible damage. But from there, to the port area, like a lot of the windows were blown out, a lot of the buildings were damaged, and so everybody experienced it throughout the whole city of Beirut. So everybody felt it, experienced it. We're impacted by it. There's been a lot of trauma, and again, it's important to note that people really there were people were injured, but also a lot of psychosocial issues with children. And so we do have partners who who bring children together to help them to kind of have a place to be safe, to feel safe again, to play, and also to get psychosocial support from professionals in that area.
And a question about partners, and you talked a lot about the partners that MCC works with. We work through partners in the countries where we are present. Just wondering if you would say a bit more about throughout the Europe and the Middle East. Are we primarily working with previous partners? Are there new partners that you're looking for or who have come on the scene? Give us a bit of a range of understanding about the kinds of partners and how we work with them, and or change who we work with if needed.
I'd say there's a wide range. In a lot of places, we have long-standing partners who say they really appreciate our ongoing presence, but there are also places where we have new partners. So the one project that I mentioned almost in passing, didn't spend a lot of time on it, is one where we've begun working with some community level groups that are doing some sort of peace building. And so those are all new connections for MCC, and it's allowing us to reach out in different ways to learn what are creative ways that work for reaching across divides. I mean, I think maybe we should take some of that and bring it back, you know, to the US, some of that creativity at building whole communities. So that's one initiative. It's really a hard balance right now when we see the needs and we see people who we've been working with who are meeting them effectively, but at the same time wanting to reach out creatively with a new generation of partners. So it's a balance that we try to strike.
And then we go through cycles too. So we have, you know, a lot of our projects are 3-year cycles. When they come to the end, we evaluate those projects and partnerships. You know, we make decisions on if they will continue working with them or if we're going to look for some new opportunities. So again, it's an ongoing process. But again, we have a lot of long-term partners that are doing a lot of good work. They're being creative. And they're also working together kind of in ways to support each other through networking and through, you know, sharing their learnings along the way in different, you know, mostly in a certain country context, but sometimes beyond, you know, countries, so where they can come together.
I think I was in a meeting earlier this week with where international program workers were listening to a variety of partners from around the world. You were actually also in that meeting, and we were saying trying to learn from them, because this goes both ways. MCC learns things that we can pass on to people in Canada, the United States, and help shape our program and how we are, and in turn we offer things to our partners, and it feels like we need to continue that kind of back and forth and learning. A related question about then do we send workers from US, Canada, or other places in the world through MCC, or do we only work solely through partner groups?
Again, that's a mix. A lot of the hands-on work is through partner groups, grants to partners to do a wide variety of things, but we have the personal mix, you know, if you will, with some service workers and with the 1-year young adult program, SALT and Yamen and IVEP, which would come this way, but then returnees.
Could you explain what SALT, IVEP, and Yamen are?
Yeah, these are the 1-year young adult service programs. So it involves international movement. So SALT involves young adults from Canada and the US serving in another country, or Yamen being the name of the program that involves young adults moving from one country to another that doesn't involve US and Canada. And then IVEP, the longstanding, what had been a trainee program, bringing young adults to the US and Canada to serve for a year. And so that kind of mixing around has been really enriching in all these directions, because IVEP, especially is in Europe and Middle East, has involved sending young adults who will become leaders in their home communities when they come back, and not just, you know, the receiving and training leaders. And so there's an interesting mix even among that kind of serving. But there are some service workers, and we're hoping to be able to add some more internationals into these programs as travel becomes easier. We're looking at some people arriving in Ukraine and Egypt in the next months for some longer term projects.
Thanks. Another question, somebody's interested in our current partners and projects and relationships in Western Europe. You mentioned a little bit about Ukraine in Eastern Europe, and you also talked about the comforters coming from the Dutch Mennonites and Germany. So yeah, what else? How else are you relating there?
Yeah, so that kind of connection for responses to emergency needs and needs in other parts of the world, that's one way we relate to European Mennonite groups. And also work in supporting a variety of peace efforts, which actually that's overlaps. I mean, so we were hearing about, especially with Swiss groups saying we're going to send this material to Jordan, but we're also going to use that as a way to connect with other churches in our community, to use it for education about peace. I think the banner on when they were filling the container said something along the lines of, what if they called a war and we brought relief buckets? And so that kind of variety of peace efforts in Northern Ireland and Spain and Germany, not necessarily connected to relief buckets, but are ways that we connect. It's kind of wide networks, and we'll be paying some more attention to peace building and making sure that kind of networking and learning from and with each other can continue and continue to be strengthened. Yeah.
Yeah, and previously you had mentioned young adults serving with MCC or other types of service workers. So we're also interested in providing opportunities for people in Europe to serve as well with MCC. And so of course the last year has affected so much of our work and has kind of slowed us down. And so as we rethink, we still want to emphasize how people are important to the work of MCC and how we can engage people at different levels.
You spoke some about partners in Jordan and mentioned a variety of work with refugees there. Can you give a kind of a broad view of any kind of numbers of percentage of population, or just give us an idea of how to grasp what Jordan is, how Jordan is managing refugees, and then how MCC connects?
That's really interesting because of course it's very complex. The official number,
Right.
don't have the exact number of refugees, is between Syrian refugees is between 600,000 and 700,000, but it's well over 1 million Syrians in the country, some who are official and some are not official. But there are other, as Linda had that slide of the hands, you could see all the different groups of people that are in Jordan, and many are vulnerable, no matter whether they're refugees or not. So there's Iraqi refugees, there's over 1 million Egyptian migrant workers, people from different parts of Asia that are in there.
I was surprised to see the Eritrea. I think I saw Eritrea there.
Yeah, a lot of Yemeni refugees in Jordan. And what's interesting is, what we appreciate about Jordan is they are welcomed and kind of brought in and incorporated. And, so almost to the extent that you're not aware of that there are these different groups of people. But the population of Jordan is a little over 10 million people. And so, when you have 1 million Egyptians, that represents a large percentage, of the population. I think the other thing,
and 1 million Syrian refugees and 1 million,
exactly.
It's a lot of.
So there is a lot of work with refugees. There was a huge emphasis on working with Syrian refugees. But one of the things that happened is that, other vulnerable groups became neglected in the process. And so, so a lot of the work that that MCC does, or that's required, is to work with percentage of vulnerable Jordanians as part of that mix, because they are also they're also impacted by this huge influx of people, in terms of job availability and resources and that sort of thing. And the other thing to note is that in Jordan, the water availability is very scarce. And so the more people come in, the more complicated and difficult that is for people. So usually on a regular basis, water is distributed within each neighborhood once a week. So you have a tank on your roof, you get water for once a week. That's the water you use throughout that week. And some people have 2 tanks, some people have 1 tank, but now the distribution is every 2 weeks, we've heard. And so again, you can imagine that the stretch on the resources is just pretty incredible, and especially this past year with the pandemic, there have been pretty extreme lockdowns and curfews. And so people have lost work, income. And so, we're noticing a lot more like Abdullah, a lot more people like Abdullah who are, you go around anywhere in the city and you find more and more people, asking for help. You find more people in the street looking, rummaging through, maybe whatever. And so it's noticeable, but at the same time, we're grateful for the hospitality that is expressed by Jordanians. It's pretty amazing. There's just this history from ancient biblical times of hospitality in that area, and you still feel it. And Jordanians are kind of proud of that. That gift that they give in the form of hospitality.
The other part of the refugee response is at one point, and I'm not sure exactly when it was, we're fairly new to Jordan, there was an effort to respond to one refugee. So not only all the resources going to Syrians, but recognizing there are Iraqis and Yemenis and Eritreans and Somalis and Sudanese and who also have needs, and then also with the vulnerable communities that host them. So there's been a real conscious effort to do that, an effort to provide for refugees in Jordan so they don't set out on the Mediterranean for Europe. At the same time, the country with that hosts the highest number of refugees in proportion to its population is Lebanon. And so the stresses in Lebanon are strong, are heavy as well. So it's a part of the world where people are on the move, crossing boundaries for a better life or to save their life or whatever. And that gets recognized by the host communities. There might be competition for what's there, but they also recognize that people are doing what they have to do. Hard situation.
Something that most of us don't know anything about. You mentioned in talking about the reception of the comforters, how people like to open see the colors, maybe choose one. What do people know about where the meat, the school kids, the comforters? What do people know about where they come from, and who MCC is, and the fact that it's given in the name of Christ? What is that? That would mean one thing to numerous Christian recipients of the many Christians in the Middle East. But it might mean something else to a Muslim recipient. So tell us a little bit about how MCC communicates that.
Yeah, I think there's a wide variety of understanding of what this all is, but I think that all the staff of partner organizations and nearly all recipients would know that this comes from Christians who care about them. And I often kind of think, there are much more efficient ways of transferring, pencils to school kids. But there's something about the many hands that touch, especially a comforter. That level of friction makes things less efficient, but much more warm. And it builds the warmth. And that warmth is communicated. And when people hear the stories of how this is gathered and offered, they understand where that warmth comes from. It's not like it's new warmth, it's understanding where that comes from. And so, there's a wide variety, but it is understood that this is from Christians who are acting out of faith. And that's very respected by non-Christian communities in the Middle East. It's appreciated by Christians, especially when it helps them be better neighbors, and because of what they can offer to people in need. But it's also appreciated as genuine faith, and we've always encountered when we speak genuinely of faith, we can speak with the other in respectful and respected ways.
Can you tell us a little bit about your own lives during lockdowns in COVID? What was it like for you? What could you do? What couldn't you do? How did you manage?
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the middle of that, and again, Jordan was very kind of strict in terms of lockdowns, and we had to be at home by 7 o'clock. We could leave the house in the morning at 6 o'clock. Fridays, which is the official day off, was closed. So so for many months, Fridays were we stayed at home, and I kind of enjoyed some of that because it was so quiet and so it kind of peaceful. And I also, I often said, this isn't a great experience sometimes, but it's also, I kind of labeled it the year of prayer, because it's like, this is a really important time to be, growing in faith and connecting with God, and to sharing, our resources with people who are much more vulnerable than we were. One thing that, many people lost their jobs, many people lost their income and livelihood. And so I was often reminded, like, of how, I'm grateful that I have steady work and whatever, but also how do we become more compassionate and just sensitive to people who don't have the resources that we have. And so it was a good way to, because we travel a lot in our work and we're visit these countries, and it was a chance to just be in Jordan, to get to know our community, to know our neighbors, and really appreciate the hospitality. The food is great. It's just awesome in all these places, but in Jordan too.
Okay.
And so if you like hummus, it has great hummus. So
one thing, a year and a half ago seems like a lifetime, but anyway, we were told, you need to find ways to travel less. It's a job that you can always need to go and see a program and check in on staff and what have you. You need to find ways of traveling less. Well, we didn't need to do that, right? Because we traveled less. And for over a year, we didn't travel at all internationally. And this spring, we were able to visit Lebanon and Ukraine, and you heard, that we connected with those programs and some of what we were able to pass on here. But when we weren't able to leave the house, I started doing embroidery. And that's been a real kind of great thing to come out of this. I didn't know I could do embroidery, but we learned to do things we didn't know we could. And one is Zoom all the time, and another one for me has been embroidery.
There were a lot of challenges. There was some painful situations that we, experienced and became aware of. But we're also grateful for all the love we experienced, all the graciousness that we've seen extended. I think what was really important for us as AD, area directors or whatever, or as working for MCC, was that the work didn't stop. And that, sometimes some of the work became more critical, and it has become more and more so in many ways. And so I think what helped keep us going was knowing that there was something that needed to be done. And like, there were whole communities that were locked down, and people didn't have money to go out and buy food they needed for the next few days. they didn't have enough money for that day, and they didn't have enough money for bread sometimes. And that's hard to know about. And I think when people don't even have enough money to buy the basic essential of bread, then I think things are not good. And so partners had to be creative on how to get food to people, how to get resources to people, how to help, when they're not allowed themselves to be out, and find ways around, some regulations to be able to do that work. And so, we become more aware of even how much more vulnerable people have become as a result of this past year.
And shared some of that, yeah. Thank you. Another question area came in saying you spoke a little bit about work in Gaza, mentioning the rabbits, how they survive, sometimes thrive, maybe, I don't know. But could you say a little bit about the work in West Bank? What are we doing there? And maybe related, where are people there seeing hope particularly in relation to folks that are in areas where they're losing lands to the illegal settlements.
Yeah, the loss of land and the kind of the movement of even some fringe settlers to claiming and land and burning trees and crops has been really hard and ongoing. But there are people like at the Tent of Nations, as familiar to a lot of people, who said we refuse to be enemies, we refuse to have enemies. It can be really, and again, it's a bit like reaching out to people with no food, right? You do what you can for that day. You find the person who will walk with you for that day. A lot of like training courses, peace building and democratic processes and other sorts of community things moved online. And there's one group that found that when young adults were stuck at home, they were happy to connect with trainings like this and connected, and there were new connections made and groups that gathered. And so that sort of, WhatsApp group or Zoom group on a phone that actually connected in new ways among people interested in working for peace or some of it I think was economic development sort of training, really was something that was a sign of hope. I wouldn't say it was a hopeful thing in and of itself because of the situation it was responding to. So there continues to be people responding creatively. If the MCC Washington office provides resources to those of you who would like to respond with more advocacy sorts of efforts, I think somebody can put that in the box, in the chat box, for where to go to find out. Yeah, more information and more kind of how to respond to work from this end, the changes that we can be part of. Did you have, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say we were struck by the I have it written down here because I didn't want to forget it. It's a quote, but we were struck by the steadfastness of a director of one project who said, we make sacrifices and work long days, and often with people who don't like us. We don't leave people by themselves even during the most challenging times. So I think that's kind of this ongoing, sometimes I wonder, where do people have the energy to keep going, and especially with this past year, the way it was, and, so, yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned that, let's shift a little bit, the participants are interested, some of the questions coming in are interested in, so what do we do? What we've heard very encouraging things and inspiring things about partners. And I certainly think we have a better idea also of your own role and what you're doing, and other MCCers in other roles and positions. But for people on this webinar, for people in the U.S., there's so many needs. Is it money? Is it letters or phone calls to offices, advocacy? Is it relief kits?
Yep.
What do we do?
Yes, and that.
I mean, I did want to just say, like, I think, I mean, this is what I always say, but like prayer, and just to kind of, be aware of how God is with each of us in our lives, and how we can extend, the love that God has for us to, beyond us to other parts of the world. And so I think that's very real, and that's very sustaining, especially these days, where things are very complex, and where there's a lot of, confusion and sorrow, but there's also, we can't forget, the joy that we're trying to grow, and especially I would say in the hearts of young people. How do we bring young people and engage young people and support young people in the projects that we have? Because I think that's, if there's a silver lining, it would be, helping young people to develop good skills for bringing peace into their communities.
We put out this title for this webinar, not quite sure where it would go, but kind of with the assumption that we're all gathered here because we care, because we understand the gift of love. We recognize it when we receive it, we try to give it, and with the sense that we all give to where we can, which can be to and through MCC to the partners we recognize, but it can also be in your own community in similar ways. It can be a way, it can also be gathering your community together to amplify, you know, a gift either to neighbors nearby or farther away, something through MCC, whether it's letters to lawmakers or relief kits or comforters. That's a bit the sense, the understanding that, you know, this business of hope is getting up in the morning and figuring out how to help somebody else in a practical way as we go about our lives.
I was particularly, I noticed you're talking about or sharing examples of young people being involved, and I think certainly each of us should be, you know, I hope there are young people on this, young adults, young children on this, on Facebook Live or on the webinar, who are hearing this and realizing all of us can do something. I've noticed that as well with people who are no longer able to travel for whatever reason, but now say, now I can do comforters. You know, I picked up some comforters from a neighbor this week, and she had just done her 100th comforter in the last year and a half, and there is a link, there's a connection there between what I do in my very little piece. I might have the gift of speaking with somebody in a position to make policy. I might with a call, I might have a gift of sewing or pulling together a group of people to really make relief kits. It takes, we're all linked. It takes all of us. Well, we're just about at the end of our time. Just wondering if you would have anything else that you would want to share with each of us for us to remember. Appreciate the title, Doing Our Part for Healing and Wholeness of the World. And I think I've got some ideas about that, but what else would you say for us?
Well, thank you for joining us. Remember that image of the tree where the leaves are for the healing of the nations, but the leaves are each one of us, just one leaf on this tree of life that we're joined to.
Yeah.
I want to go ahead.
No, just grateful for this time, grateful to talk about, you know, this work with you all, and just thank you for the support that you give to MCC and the interest that you share in the work that we're doing. So thank you.
And I hope all of us take with us the image of Abdullah, or Abdallah, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, he was hungry, but it was more important to take care of his 7-month-old, I think you said, baby sister. I will carry that image with me as I think about my grandsons and how they care for their baby sister, but they don't have to go out and look for that milk. It's a good image to carry with us. For our listeners, thank you. Let me add my thanks for joining us this evening, for your questions, for your interaction. Would invite you also to check out our new podcast. We have the podcast series with the title Relief, Development, and Podcast, if you can get that little pun there. It's available wherever you listen to your podcast. And this month, related to our topic, you'll hear from Amal Nassar. She's a Palestinian woman from the Tent of Nations, which Linda and James mentioned. It's in the West Bank. And this woman is committed to peace building with neighboring Israeli settlements, which is a real challenge and probably fits that what you mentioned, James, but we work with people who don't necessarily like us. Another way to be involved for you listening is a virtual, it's a Borderlands learning tour. We are still not doing the face-to-face learning tours, but this is a virtual learning tour. It's June 28th to July 2nd. It's a daily 3-hour session. So you'll visit some partners, visit some locations, and that will help all of us understand more about the increasing migrant deaths that are happening along the U.S.-Mexico border, militarization, environmental degradation, the effects on habitats around surrounding habitat of all of this, and on our sister communities across that border. So you can sign up at mcc.org, or you can call your local MCC office for more information. And also in the fall, then we'll have an advocacy, a webinar about advocacy. So those of you interested in policy and the ways we can approach this from a policy, these problems from a policy level, you can tune into that one. So I thank each of you, and I pray that God blesses you in your own setting as you work to share love and compassion where you are and doing your own part. Blessings and good night.